Welcome to College Admissions Toolbox, giving you the edge you need to get into the colleges of your dreams, with your host, Steve Schwartz. That's me. Today, we're talking with Megan Dorsey.
Megan, you have an incredible story. Dive into your journey a little bit and briefly share with us just a little bit more about yourself on a personal level.
Well, on a personal level, I've got two kids, an 8-year-old son and a 14-year-old daughter. Our daughter's going to be starting high school next year, so I get to experience all of this from the parent's perspective now, not just as a counselor. And I would say part of how I got to where I am is by making a lot of mistakes in my own college process. So I know it always sounds easy when you hear it coming from someone who's been there, but I've made mistakes along the way myself.
Can you give us an example of a mistake that you made that you turned around and brought us to where you are today?
Yes. My first one is I didn't do a really good job in understanding how to research colleges when I was in high school. I went to kind of a medium-sized high school at a graduating class of about 350 students. I grew up in Colorado, so in Colorado Springs, and a lot of my peers were just going to go to state universities. But a number of my friends were also looking at private schools like I was. And I think that our college guidance counselor didn't really know what to do with us. I did meet with my counselor. I knew her. She knew me. But other than giving me this giant printout, this is, in the days before the internet, when dinosaurs roamed the earth in the 80s, I just had this long printout and nobody ever talked about finding a school that was the right fit. It was, you can probably get in here, maybe not here, definitely here. And nobody talked about, gosh, you've got good grades and good test scores. You could go so many places. Why don't you find the place that's right for you? And I initially went to the George Washington University. I had an academic scholarship, but in the middle of my sophomore year, I realized that just wasn't the right school for me. Great school for other people is really interesting living in downtown Washington, D.C., but it was a bad fit. And all I can describe to people is it's like having a pair of shoes that doesn't just fit right. They might be the right style, they might be the right color, but you walk around in them and you realize these are not the shoes I'm supposed to be wearing every day. And I ended up transferring, applied at the end of my sophomore year to transfer, and I went to Rice University, which was a much better fit. Really fit my personality, let me concentrate more on academics the way I wanted to do it. So that was kind of my first mistake made good. And it gave me the perspective that I share now with my own students about finding a good fit. It also gave me the perspective of what it's like to be a transfer student, which is a little bit different. And I would say, Steve, you would think I'd learned my lesson with that, but I made some more mistakes. My next mistake was, ever since I started college, I went with the idea of going to law school. I'd been on the debate team and the mock trial team in high school. I was interested in political science and government and law. And the problem was, again, I didn't seek out much guidance and counseling, and I didn't receive a lot of it. It took me into my first year of law school when I clerked for one of the big firms in Houston to realize that it's an academically interesting subject, but I didn't want to do the job. And I ended up taking a leave of absence from law school and never going back, because I found that even if I finished the degree, there I would be 2 years later having to figure out what I wanted to do. And when I took that leave of absence from law school, I taught LSAT classes for Princeton Review, which is how I ended up getting into what I do now, which is test prep and college advising. So it's an interesting path paved with poor counseling and lots of mistakes.
Oh, wow, Megan. So many powerful nuggets there. I mean, I know that when I was looking into colleges, I was just focused on getting into the best college possible. I mean, I ended up getting lucky, and Columbia ended up being the right fit for me, but it could have ended up being a disaster. I didn't really care. A large school or a small school or rural or urban. I just wanted the top-ranked school. That's what mattered to me, and I think that's what matters to a lot of our listeners out there as well. So what was the moment that you realized you were not at the right school and that you need to change the path you were on?
I probably could have told you I wasn't really happy, and habits of things like occasionally sleeping through class, might have been a telltale sign. But the pivotal moment was my sister was a high school senior and had flown out to DC over spring break. Our spring breaks kind of overlapped on a weekend. And I was to drive her down to look at William and Mary in Richmond, Virginia, and drove down. She took the tour, and I realized just talking with her and hearing everybody on the tour that I was at the wrong school. Everyone was talking about, this is what we offer and this is why people are happy here. And I looked at what I was doing and realized I'm in a neat location. I lived 4 blocks from the White House, and there are lots of neat people, but it isn't for me. And that week I requested applications to transfer. And it was late. I'm going to tell you, it was late in the game to submit a transfer application. When Rice sent the application, again, this is before the days of online, they included a note that said, very few people make it into Rice on transfer. I think their statistic was somewhere around 5. We accept 5% of our transfer applicants. We hope you've made other arrangements. And I was like, oh, I'm a little put off by that, but I'm also challenged to get everything together and sent out in about a week. So it was very clear to me that I needed to go somewhere else. And if I didn't get into Rice, there were a couple other great schools I was looking at that I could have gone to.
Oh, wow, Megan. So you got everything together in 1 week? Walk us through those steps. That's such a rapid process.
Well, it really was a matter of, I realize now that this is not where I'm supposed to be. I better change where I want to go. And as soon as I started looking at the deadlines, I'm guessing that it was something like April 1st deadlines for transfer, way back when, I realized I don't have a lot of time. I need to get going and start doing the best research I could. So I went down to the public library that was, a number of blocks from the university, and I got out all of their college guidebooks, and I started doing the best research I can, because I can tell you I did not apply as a transfer to any of the schools that I had applied to when I was a high school senior. So I had a much better idea of the type of campus life that I was looking for. And I also realized that as kind of exciting as it was to live in downtown Washington, D.C., that wasn't the type of atmosphere I wanted. I really wanted a campus feeling. And at GW, you could tell it was a campus because they had, GW flags hanging from the light poles. Other than that, it looked like you were in the middle of the city. And I just started my research then. And I'm going to tell you, the essays that I wrote to transfer, I think, were really inspired by what I wanted. And looking back after I was at Rice, I realized the what I want in a college, why I want to transfer essay really accurately described the type of environment that Rice was. So it was meant to be.
To boil it down there, wow, it seems like the actual transfer essay said to you, this is the right fit for me. Just looking at the questions they were asking, maybe gave you a little bit of insight into the personality of the school. What do you think about that?
That is fair. I didn't know at the time that Rice was as good a fit as I found it was to be later. I was also a little wary because I really thought that GW was a good fit when I applied, but I think I wasn't really clear on what I wanted. I think a lot of high school students are the same. I wanted to get away from my parents. I wanted, as I said, I grew up in Colorado. I wanted to get out of Colorado. Both of my parents had graduated from University of Colorado at Boulder, so both were CU graduates. Yeah, I could have gone to CU, but I wanted something different. And that was probably the biggest thing I was looking for, was different. Other than that, I didn't really think through what type of student am I? What type of environment would I learn best in? I just wanted, new and different. And it seems so exciting to be in, a big city. Sure.
Yeah. I love the big city. I'm out in New York, actually. But if you could give yourself, going back to when you were applying to college, if you could give yourself back then in high school, one piece of advice, what would it be? It would be look for a school that is a good fit, fits socially, academically, the way you learn, and don't think that there are only a certain handful of schools that will have that. I went by what a lot of people did at the time, which is a little checklist. I wanted to go East Coast, so that was my geography. I wanted an urban center, not a rural center. I wanted a mid-sized school. If you just go by those checklist, easy sort items, there's so many schools that fit that, but it doesn't really get into the idea of, does it fit me? Here's another hint that I did it the wrong way. The first time I went
to the GW campus was for freshman orientation. It didn't seem like touring schools was that big a deal when I was in high school. And I don't know of many people who did it. You did if you could drive there in an hour or two. I've worked with a number of students, and what I would consider worst moment wasn't necessarily in the application process, but this is when I was a school guidance counselor, had a wonderful student, had done very well, probably in the top quarter of his class, wanted to go to a small private university, did in the first semester, got caught by campus police with drugs and basically was asked to leave the university. And, the young man's father was a prominent doctor. The kid was a smart kid. He was a nice kid. He was hardworking. And here he was in November of his first semester in college, back at home and having to work on transfer applications that stated essentially that he was home from his first choice school because of this drug arrest that he had on campus. Those are the hard ones. Hard things to recover from. Not that it's impossible, but just heartbreaking.
That's rough.
It is. But I've worked with other students. I had a young man I worked with who his senior year had come out of a major, major drug rehab program, a residential program that he had been in the entire year before. And he said, my recovery is going to be part of my essay. And I know that may be a turnoff for some schools. Colleges don't want kids who are going to get in trouble and get kicked out. He said, but it is so much of who I am now that if they don't want me because of that, then that's not the place for me to be. I need to be somewhere where I can be open and honest about my past and move forward. And he was, just a really inspiring kid because he had really hit bottom and really did such a good job in presenting himself and advocating for what he needed in order to move forward. The good and bad of the drug issues.
Wow, Megan, you just dropped so many knowledge bombs there. I love it. You're talking about embracing who you are and embracing what you've experienced and really showing that you've matured and you've grown and you've been able to move past it, but not trying to hide it, not trying to sweep it under the rug. And certainly you can't fail to disclose something like that. And, you just want to talk about who you are, what you've done, and then what you've learned from that experience.
Absolutely. And I think one of the best things that young man said is, I understand that this may turn off some schools. He went in understanding that there could be a downside to being that open about what a lot of colleges perceive as a really risky behavior or situation, but that he could eloquently state where he was and go forward knowing that was the right thing for him. He wasn't worried about, is everybody going to accept me? He had really come to understand that he wanted to be accepted at the school that wanted him for who he was.
Was he able to right away know how to handle that, or did he need a little bit of guidance and a little bit of evolution in terms of coming to that realization?
I think he was a very self-reflective student. And so he put most of that together before I even saw a first draft. And we did have a conversation about, this could be a red flag. And he understood that, but was very, very insistent that part of his recovery was to be open and honest about where he was and where he was going. And he was just so mature in the way that he could express himself and the way he could say, I made a mistake and I've paid for it. And here's the path I'm on. And was just very good also in advocating for what he needed. He needed to be in a drug-free dorm. He needed to be in an environment that would keep him clean and sober. But I would also tell people there's also a right way to say it. His writing came across with great maturity. It's different than saying, well, here I am and too bad. So I think find someone who can read over it who's outside of the problem. Mom and dad might not be the right people to give feedback on that. But someone like you, Steve, or me, we've been there. We're impartial to the personal situations that have happened. We can give feedback about how this essay reads to an adult. How does that come across? Maybe not just to my peers or my parents or my family, but how might someone in admissions view that?
No, absolutely. There are definitely right ways and wrong ways, and want to make sure you go about it in a mature, respectful, responsible, mature way. So definitely having some sort of impartial adult third party can help you decide the right way to go about that. Now, I want to move in, Megan, to the aha moment in college admissions. Tell us the story of that light bulb moment of inspiration.
I think my moment of inspiration for my own work with students came a couple years ago when, just out of coincidence, I had 3 young men I was working with who were all in the bottom quarter of their graduating classes. Everyone's like, oh, bottom quarter. What I realized is, in many ways, it's very easy to advise that go-getter who's got the great grades and the great test scores and a lot of ambition because they have so many options. And even the student who's kind of in the middle of the pack, maybe not the top of their class, still has so many options. But these 3 young men at the bottom of their classes really inspired me because as I got to know them as people, I realized these were not lazy or stupid kids. One young man was an Eagle Scout, and kind of his story is that he had an undiagnosed learning disability that they didn't really catch until the beginning of his junior year. At the same time, his dad was out of town frequently, and so as a 9th and 10th grade guy, he kind of goofed off more than he should and didn't develop good study habits. He started to turn it around his junior year, but he was at a competitive high school, and bad, low and bad grades those first 2 years just really couldn't turn it around. One of the other guys also had a learning disability, but they had known about it for a long time. A hardworking, really nice kid. And he was really involved in FFA. I don't know if you guys have that in New York, Future Farmers of America.
I haven't come across that here in New York yet.
I was going to say, maybe a sign that I'm from Texas. And it's not all about raising animals, although he did each year raise pigs and a cow, but also did a lot of engineering and construction work that had practical applications. That was part of what he did. And he was so committed. He was the president of that organization for his high school, his senior year. And you know what? He's the type of kid who he needed options in college, but he did not need to go to the big major state university. He needed to go to a smaller place that would embrace his learning style and help him become successful. But at the same time, an environment that fostered the talents that he already had and the leadership that he already had. And it was really an aha for me in working with these young men that year was there are a lot of kids who are struggling with their test scores, with their class rank, who maybe more than anybody else need help in applying to college. Because to them, the message from the media is it's so hard to get into college. Even the valedictorians are being turned down. These guys and their parents were really worried that community college might be their only option. And I worked with them to say, there's so many other schools out there. Let's find some places that are right for you. And to tell you the excitement they had, Steve, as they would get letters of acceptance was 10 times that of the students I've worked with who've gone to Yale or Harvard or Stanford or Duke. These guys were thrilled to get into that smaller state university, and each letter of acceptance meant more choices for them. So I think that was a really turning point for me in my practice in seeing that sometimes the help, the professional guidance is something that isn't necessarily, reserved for the top students, but maybe even more desperately needed by those who are struggling.
No, absolutely, Megan. That's such a good point. Now I want to move into the lightning round with you, where I'll just ask you a couple of quick rapid-fire questions. You give me your rapid-fire responses. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, great, Megan. So what's your number one piece of advice for the college admissions process?
Find good fit.
Could you share one habit with us that contributes to the college admissions success?
Visiting college campuses and taking the official tour. Well, and I think so many folks are just going by word of mouth. Oh, I heard from my friend or neighbor. That's not the same as seeing it in person. You test drive a car. Why wouldn't you go test drive your college?
Well, you got to get straight from the horse's mouth. What's one online college admissions resource that you absolutely love?
I have to say, I do like the College Board's search feature. I think that's very accessible to parents and students. It's a good starting place.
Absolutely. What's one book that no college applicant should be without?
I have recently read The Perfect Score Project by Debbie Steer, and I really like that for the perspective of what it takes to do well on these tests and the ideas that there are many different types of test prep.
Oh, yeah, no, I loved that one too, and I'll link to that in the show notes. What are you currently working on or looking forward to?
Well, I'm helping students finish up their end of the year testing. What I'm not looking forward to is the new revised SAT and PSAT. We just don't have enough information out yet.
That's going to be such a big change.
Oh, right now, to me, it's a disaster because it's like saying you're going to play a game and it's going to look like baseball, but we haven't given you the exact details. Man, I wish they'd release some more information.
I know. We'll definitely have to be keeping an eye out on that. Well, great, Megan. Thanks so much. Before you go, just leave us with a parting thought.
I would just say that no matter where a student is, there are good college options out there that are not just community colleges. So dig, don't just go by name or ranking alone. Don't just go by what you've heard. Visit and find it because there will be a fit for every student.
Definitely. There are so many schools out there. There's something for everybody. You just got to do the research. Thanks so much for joining us today, Megan. Can you let our listeners know how they can reach you?
Yes. My website is collegeprepresults.com, or come listen to my weekly podcast, the College Prep Podcast, with my co-host, academic coach Gretchen Wegner.
Great. No, everyone, check it out. Subscribe to it. It's great. It definitely inspired me in a lot of ways with my practice and also starting up this podcast as well, College Admissions Toolbox. So we'll be linking to Megan's podcast and website and all the other resources we mentioned on the show notes. Megan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for listening to College Admissions Toolbox. Head over to www.collegeadmissionstoolbox.com to get more free tools and resources that will help you get into the colleges of your dreams. When I first started working on my applications, I felt like I was competing with everyone at my school. There was this sense that top colleges would only take a few kids from each high school, and it made people afraid to help each other. So I went online and looked at message boards and forums to try and get help from others who were also going through the process. But I felt like a lot of them just had this kind of negative vibe. Everyone's accomplishments seemed more impressive than mine, and the people who posted were just kind of full of themselves. To be honest, it ended up making me feel bad about my chances, like I didn't have a shot at getting into my reach schools. So over the past few years, I've been working to try and change this. I've built an online forum where people actually help each other instead of putting each other down. And you can get advice from experts who've helped thousands of students get into top colleges. So check it out and feel free to post any questions you have at collegeadmissionstoolbox.com/forum.